experienced matchmakers come to sharpen their skills, grow their businesses, and elevate the matchmaking industry. Your host is Arlene Washburn, an award-winning ethical matchmaking advocate, mentor, and industry innovator. Let's dive in.
Welcome back to the Matchmaker Mentor podcast, where we help aspiring and experienced matchmakers build thriving, ethical businesses and empower our industry to grow with integrity. And today's episode is a special one. We're talking about a topic that doesn't always come up in our industry events. And that's going to be solved today because we're talking about dispute resolution, compliance, and how to protect your matchmaking business before things go wrong. And I'm thrilled to introduce to you our guest and a strategic partner in the International Matchmaking Compliance Board, Peter Nahmias, who is an American attorney admitted to both the New York and the New Jersey bar, and a Spanish abogado admitted to the Madrid bar. He also is a fellow of the Chartered Institute of Arbitrators, and an international distinction recognized for excellence in arbitration. He holds a Juris Doctor from Fordham University School of Law and a master's degree in legal business advisory from the Instituto de Empresa de Madrid. Peter has published extensively on international commercial and investment law, speaks regularly in seminars around the world, and teaches as an adjunct professor at both St. Louis University in Madrid and EAE Business School. He's fluent in English and Spanish, as am I. And more importantly, he brings over 30 years of experience in highly regulated industry to the matchmaking space. So whether you're a solo matchmaker or running a growing agency, this episode will help you understand what to put in place before client complaints ever reach your inbox and why this matters now more than ever. Let's cover our bases with a brief disclaimer. The information shared in this episode is for educational and informational purposes only and does not constitute legal advice. The International Matchmaking Compliance Board is a self-regulatory organization, not a law firm, and neither myself or Peter Nahmias is offering individualized legal guidance. Always consult with a qualified attorney in your particular jurisdiction. Peter, welcome to the show. I'm so glad to have you here.
Wonderful. Well, thank you very much. I'm thrilled. This is really a treat.
Yeah. So, Peter, I know you really didn't know much about the matchmaking world when I reached out to you. It feels like years ago, but it's, this has been in the works for months now. And I'm curious, what was it that changed your perspective to want to be involved in something like this?
Well, I mean, what can I say? I mean, your charm, of course, I mean, how can anybody just say, oh, no, I'm not, no, forget it, go away. I mean, so I think I think that's it in a nutshell. Good night, folks. Thanks for coming.
That's all, folks.
No, I don't mean to make light of it. I mean, I think it's interesting. I mean, I've had and thank you for that great introduction. Look, I mean, I started practicing in New Jersey actually 30 years ago, a little bit over 30 years ago, and I've always worked in highly regulated industries and in different capacities. And as a young lawyer, I did environmental defense, where I used to represent chemical companies. I worked in the alcohol industry. I worked in the tobacco industry. And so one of the things, and I guess maybe we'll talk about it over this hour, is one of the things you learn as when you work in industries like that is, you think of regulation and how an industry is regulated. It's part of the operating environment. It conditions how you think, how you compete, how you find advantage. It's the road, right? And so I think in some way, when you ask, well, gee, what why the matchmaking industry? I mean, clearly it's it certainly is not something as controversial as industries that I have worked with, but I think as I've come to work, as you and I have been working together, I've come to see, like, wow, how regulation really affects this industry, really creates an operating environment that is very challenging for people. So that's one, right? So that, I guess that's one thing that kind of appeals to me. I think also too, I mean, cut to the chase, it's wow, how nice to actually be working in an industry that is so is I don't know. I mean, addressing some of the great academic.
I'm having a hard time hearing you.
I'm oh boy, God, I was just saying something really touching and beautiful
No,
there.
right there. That's perfect.
But no, I'm just saying that it's such a pleasure to be working in industry that does good, and so any controversies that are out there, okay, we can deal with them. But ultimately, the product that we're delivering is something really worth the fight, worth the trouble. So, you know, um,
You know,
that question, I don't know.
no, I agree. And the thing is I very similar to you came from an industry that was highly regulated, right? I came from pharma. I was in the pharmaceutical industry for 20 years, and I was surprised, and also I guess, I was just surprised that there were no what quote unquote regulations for this industry. But the bigger surprise is that there are regulations everywhere that it's just not there's not an awareness of it. And for me, when I started down this path, it was just recognizing that, wow, I've been in this industry for well over a decade, and never did it come up at a conference or anywhere that, hey, these are regulations that impact you. And by the way, the regulations vary from state to state, country to country. I mean, it's
Mm,
so interesting. And just also from an ethical perspective, making sure that there's a conduct that is adhered to for protection of the clients and also for protection of the businesses, right?
mm,
Because I think I mentioned to you, I watched this movie, The Materialist, and I mean, I cringed halfway through through that movie because there was a lot of behavior that was not typical of what true matchmaking is all about. There was not a certain care that was given in the particular case. I don't spoiler alert if you haven't seen the movie, but one of her clients ends up in a situation where that might have been avoided, perhaps if there was a little bit more due diligence, which is really what matchmaking is all about. So some of it is conduct and, a code of conduct, and some of it is just understanding that there are already laws that apply to you in this industry. So I want to move to an area. The main reason I contacted you initially was your extensive and amazing background in ADR, alternative resolution, and then that began the conversation because I really wanted to get you involved in that, and then it just brought in, became a bigger thing because you saw the value in what we're doing here, and I just want you to talk a little bit about this because there are matchmakers, for example, who don't have ADR in their contracts, and
right.
that could be challenging. So I would love for you to share a little bit about the difference between having it and not having it. What is it, etc.
Okay. Well, I mean, wow, we can do an hour or more just on that. But I mean, it's ADR stands for Alternative Dispute Resolution, right? And what that means, just in plain English, is resolving your disputes in out of court, and so it encompasses various different modalities of of how you would go about resolving disputes. So it can go anything from just a simple negotiation. It can include conciliation, negotiation, mediation, arbitration, mixes of that. I mean, it's really a mixed bag. Usually, when lawyers identify themselves as ADR practitioners, usually they're referring to arbitration or mediation, which are much more let's just say organized, the rule, kind of a rule-based approach to dealing with dispute resolution. So in a nutshell, that's possible. Arbitration looks and feels a lot like litigation. It's basically hiring an arbitrator or a panel of arbitrators, depends on the size of the case, to decide your case. And it's, it's almost, it's like a lawsuit, but and I may, to the lawyers out there who do this, I apologize if I'm, if I'm making light of it, but it's basically having private judges adjudicate your case. So instead of going to a courtroom, it's done in a hotel room someplace. And the parties present their case, present their evidence, and it looks a lot like a trial. It's the speciality of arbitration is that it can be tailored to the parties, but you select an arbitrator who really knows the case, and so you don't spend your time trying to educate a judge on the dispute. I think the real benefit of arbitration, and particularly in complex cases, is the parties can really tailor the procedure and get through it a lot faster, a lot more expeditiously than a normal litigation. I think, and again, there's so many other things, but I think one of the big benefits is confidentiality. It's the parties usually will stipulate that whatever happens in that proceeding and the outcome, it remains strictly between the parties and not public. So there's no published opinions. There's no it's a confidential thing. And, depending on the nature of the case, that in just that one quality really sets it apart, makes it very interesting for certain disputes. Yeah.
What's interesting about that is that often people who hire professional matchmakers are wanting to do it. I mean, this is a reason, not the only reason. They want confidentiality. They don't want to have their photos on online spaces and things like that. They want someone who's, doing all the vetting for them and verifying information, etc. And I think this concept of having this private dispute resolution is still a neutral, professional, private function that is designed to protect all parties. So it's not for one side or the other, obviously. But what's nice about it is the privacy, so that it's not, someone who might be famous may not want to be in the news if they have an issue that they want to resolve, and it's resolved through a professional. And I might add that it's a separate entity from the IMCB. So if anybody decides they want to use our service for that, they basically fill out a request, and then that gets forwarded to your company, which is an arbitration company. So there's a firewall there, but
Right.
it is something that is private. It's really designed to protect all parties, but also, to your point, which I think is huge, is just not having to educate the judge about something, because as you have become more and more acclimated to what the matchmaking world is all about, you're understanding how it works. So you can come in and actually do something that's a little bit quicker than someone who would need that kind of level of education.
I think so. Well put. I don't want to reiterate, but I think that's often big consideration why you might choose arbitration versus trying your luck at trial court. There are other benefits as well. I mean, in ordinary jurisdiction, you lose or win, you could be facing an appeal or more various appeals, and your case may drag on for a long time. Arbitration is usually a one-shot deal. There are no appeals. There's no interlocutory thing. It's an issue really of case ends, and if there are irregularities, then you have the option to try to challenge, get the award. No, right? But so it has these benefits, but going to your point, I think that's really. I mean, look, if we were talking oil and gas arbitration, or we were talking infrastructure, I mean, yeah, you would want somebody who knows something about the oil and gas industry sitting as your arbitrator, rather than a poor judge who has absolutely no idea anything about those contracts in that industry and what delays are. You know what I mean? So it's really just getting someone who resolves a dispute, who understands those types of disputes, right? So, well, yeah, I mean, so that's something that you and I have been working on here at IMCB. Arbitration. And yeah, and I don't want to gobble up the whole hour talking about arbitration and mediation, but mediation is another modality, which is really an assisted negotiation, right? So where the mediator is not deciding a case, he's not there to decide who's right, who's wrong. Um, the mediator is there to help the parties negotiate a settlement, if it makes sense for the party. So you're really trying to help parties find common ground and put an end to their dispute. And so again, depending on the nature of the controversy, that can be an incredibly optimal method to use. Oftentimes, when you just think about like the disputes people get into, it starts as one thing, and ultimately, when you get into it, you realize it's about something else. In arbitration or in court, you really don't have that flexibility to get into what the conflict is really about. Mediation, you do. And so I think it's pretty cool. That's not the most technical term, but I think it's pretty cool that way.
Yeah, no, I
that's
agree.
right to do it.
And look, this is a very highly emotional industry, so having that option is ideal. And I want to talk about a little bit of what happens if you're not protected through having this type of option in your contract, for example. I've seen matchmakers get sued. People may get shut down, dragged online, simply because they didn't have a contract or a process for resolution. And so, an example of that, just this year, earlier this year in February, there was a lawsuit with a matchmaking company based out of California who was sued by uh, an individual. I'm going to say, I don't want to like bring it all front and center. This is public information, but an individual based out of New York. Now, one of the things that the International Matchmaking Compliance Board brings to the table is bringing the awareness to anyone who goes through the accreditation process about the differences in the laws and the regulations, and understanding that if you are a matchmaking company in California, you need to follow the laws where your clients are, especially if they're hiring you online. And so with this gentleman, he, first of all, this company did not give him a copy of the dating service consumer bill of rights, which is a mandatory thing when you set up a contract. They also had a very vague contract. They also did not abide by the rules of, you have to, you have a certain number of referrals that you must give when you're working with a New York client. And if you don't, then you cannot charge a certain amount because you've exceeded a certain quota, or if you didn't meet the quota, I should say. So whatever, that's details that we'll get into. If you are a matchmaker listening and
Right.
you want to get accredited, we will help get you straightened out so that you understand what you're doing and where you're working. And when you go into a market, that you take the care and understanding to follow, the regulations in that market. But this individual sued this company. He paid maybe $20,000 thereabouts. Now he's suing for almost $60,000. And this is the kind of thing that will happen. And often it will happen, and the customer ends up winning in many cases, because there's a lack of understanding from the organization. And truthfully, I don't think that anybody's out to hurt anyone. I just do believe that there's a lack of awareness, because I was part of that, not knowing, not knowing, about these laws. Nobody's talking about it. Nobody's training on this. And, certainly until I got into this rabbit hole, I didn't know anything about it. Now I'm like entrenched in this whole thing because I want to protect these companies. which are really setting out to do good work to help people because I mean, I talk about this almost ad nauseum. There is a loneliness epidemic, and there are a lot of people struggling online. That's not working for them. So the option to use a matchmaker is a wonderful option. I just want the matchmakers to be fully aware of, before they engage, this is what I need to know. Oh, I'm going to start working with clients in New York. Okay, let me get accredited. Let me make sure I have all the things in place that I need to be able to operate in that market so that I'm not violating any laws and I'm not violating any regulations that are just common ethical practices.
I don't mean to be cute or anything, but I mean, when you think about it, it's kind of it kind of makes a certain sense, doesn't it? Like, in other words, you're hiring a professional to vet potential partners, whatnot, and but before doing that relationship, you're going to have a relationship with the matchmaker, right? So you need to kind of vet the matchmaker first. In other words, the same process that they're using in vetting your potential mates, you should kind of apply to your matchmaker, right? So you know what I'm trying to say? I mean, it's kind of like
Yeah.
um, there's a criteria for selection, right? And which would apply not just to your romantic partner, but also to your matchmaker. And so if your matchmaker um, is unprofessional or not as professional as they should be, and they're careless about what laws they need to apply, well, you really start to wonder, well, how serious are they about whatever matches they're looking for, right? I mean, you start to wonder, right? I don't know. I mean, I don't think it's necessarily one thing leads from the other, but it comes down to credibility, doesn't it? So how credible are you? So you don't even take your you don't even take your own self seriously out. Really, you're going to be serious about the matches you're going out looking for. So,
Yeah.
it goes together. I don't know. Like I said, I don't need to be cute with this idea here, but I mean, I think it just kind of goes together.
I honestly think, I mean, look, what prompted all of this was in November of last year. I spoke at a conference for like 10 minutes, and everyone, the people were coming up to me after that conversation, which was all about ethics and compliance, and they were asking me questions. So I do genuinely believe that most of the people, especially the ones that are at these conferences, because these are avid learners who want to be learning and improving in what they do, they just didn't know because there's something that they say out there. There's, oh, the matchmaking industry is unregulated, but it's not. It's just that nobody has unified these regulations to
Right.
bring them and, serve them up in a way that it's like, oh, here you go. Oh, you're doing business here. Here's what you need to be aware of
Right.
until now. And I feel bad that I've been in this industry for so long, based out of New Jersey. There were a lot of things that I'm finding out now that I was like, oh, I didn't know that that was the case. And I want to protect people who go, especially I mean, a lot of these folks go into it with a genuine desire to help people find love, which honestly, in my opinion, is the most important thing. When, the biggest choice you're going to make in your life is your partner, and if you're working with an organization that's helping you, they need to be aware of what's appropriate, what's not, but also, again, I think it's such an important area. So I'm an avid believer in the matchmaking industry. I train people on it, and I also am now, working on this organization with you because I want to protect the consumer and I want to protect the matchmaker so that everybody's on the same page and we are all aware. And, as an example, we have a matchmaker's code of conduct on our website, which is the imcboard.org. That's like 17 pages alone of guidance. Okay. This is a code of conduct and guidance that is largely based on regulations that exist globally.
Right.
uh, I've seen codes of conduct in other places. There are 3 pages, like, that's not gonna give you what you need to really understand what you're doing and be and I don't blame them, right? Because you're a lawyer. I mean, how many people are digging into the laws of what they're doing? They have no clue. when the time comes that they have to deal with something, they go to their lawyer. I'm trying to avoid people having to end up in that situation.
You know, it's God, there's so much to unpack there. I mean, where to begin, right? I don't know. You know, I mean, before I forget, I mean, that is something else that I've been working on is this idea of a disciplinary procedure. So, what one of what we've done so far with IMCB and what we'll launch soon will be our own arbitration rules, right? So in the event there's a dispute that the parties want to do an arbitration, we have our own rules that are tailored to our industry. The same thing, we have our own mediation rules, again, that are tailored just to us in our industry. And then independent of from all that, we've developed a disciplinary procedure, right? So for those people who are following our ethical code, there's teeth, right? There's consequences, right? So where you violated the code and where you're alleged to have violated the code, or there's complaints about your behavior. Hey, now we're going to have a procedure in place to deal with those complaints. Now, all of this, one thing that, and again, I don't want to go down a rabbit hole, that these things are all fine and good, right? When it comes to a disciplinary ethical complaint, right? Members, these things are fine with a dispute between a client and the matchmaker, where they've chosen to have ADR deal with the dispute. All of these things are fine and good, but none of them will protect you from getting prosecuted by a state attorney general or by a consumer fraud office. Like, in other words, one thing is a private litigation or private disputes between people, and another thing is a criminal investigation, prosecution by, like I say, by the attorney general, for example, right? And so that's where compliance and compliance training really, that's where that becomes much more relevant. Meaning and again, I don't mean to get ahead of myself, but that's, the fact that you have an arbitration procedure is not going to protect you from a prosecution from an attorney general. What may be relevant is the fact that you have, that you've been following an ethical plan, that you've trained, that you're in like that may serve as a defense in case of a prosecution, stuff like that. So again, I'm just sorry, I don't mean to be going down a detour here, but I just to kind of just conceptually, so we're clear what we're talking.
Yeah, I mean, if I heard you correctly, what you're saying is if you were to be prosecuted by an attorney general,
or consumer
fact
fraud.
that you or consumer fraud or anything like that, the fact that you're even taking steps to learn to follow an ethical and compliance training and process, and you're for the most part trying to follow that will serve you in a situation like that, because it shows the intent of wanting to be compliant. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, it can be the difference between a nominal fine and a company destroying fine, right? Just to be really blunt, oftentimes the existence of a genuine compliance plan in place with real training and it's audited, like a real thing, that
Right.
the real sentencing guidelines, for example, that's a nice to have. It's not a get out of jail free card, right? But it's not bad to have.
And to your point, just recently, the Federal Trade Commission published a press release about a lawsuit that cost the Match Group. Now, that's an online service, but
Right.
they were doing something deceptive marketing, which is not uncommon in the matchmaking world. And I think often, truthfully, I really think that the deceptive marketing is not really intentional, if you will. I know that sounds crazy, but anyway, it cost them over $14 million. Now, that's a big company, obviously, but for a small company, you can be put out of business. So it is good to just be proactive and do the right thing as much as you can. But
again,
let's take a quick break.
I don't need to go. I'm sorry.
No, please go ahead.
No, but on the match case, keep in mind there, and this is kind of a point I wanted to touch before, but we kind of went off in a different direction. Is a lot of the litigation in that happens in this industry is class action litigation. A lot of the online outfits like Match, get hit with a class action, so it's not meaning that it's not one complaint. It's it's a couple hundred. Whatever.
Yeah.
And that is something that you know, that risk, right, of class action litigation, that's what drives those types of numbers. That's what makes for a $24 million case, but $14 million case, where the lawyers take a big chunk, and the actual complainants get like $40 a piece, but the lawyers walk off with this massive, so yeah, it's pretty not yet another selling point for ADR.
Yeah.
To kind of mitigate that risk.
True. All right. Well, let's take a quick break, and we're going to continue. We're going to continue in this conversation and talk a little bit more about some of the things that people need to know about how to become accredited and some of the steps involved. But before we do that, let's take a quick break.
Have you ever felt called to help others find love? You might have the heart for matchmaking, but without the right training, turning that passion into a thriving business can feel impossible. Most matchmaking courses give you outdated theories and a certificate, but no real-world strategy to build a successful business. That's where Love Pro Mastermind Academy is different. Our live Done With You training goes beyond theory, helping you develop matchmaking expertise, implement sales and marketing strategies, and master the art of client success. With expert-led instruction, accountability, and a community of like-minded professionals, you'll learn how to identify your niche, attract high-quality clients, create a seamless matchmaking process, grow a sustainable, profitable business. With over a decade of experience, we don't just train matchmakers, we create leaders in the industry. Are you ready to become an LPMA certified matchmaker and build a business that changes lives? Apply today at lovepromastermind.com.
So we were talking about the accreditation process and some of the things that are entailed in terms of this accreditation, and those things are, the contracts are a big deal, right? Because one thing that I've noticed in all the years in the industry and as a trainer, I think people think that when they have really vague contracts, that it's actually better for them if they end up in a situation, and actually it works in the opposite direction. So with the accreditation process, and I'll let you elaborate on this, our goal is to ensure that there's certain things that are in there that are very important, cancellation, refund policies, um, information about data protection, confidentiality, etc. So what part of the accreditation process is really a service for these companies, because they're submitting information that is getting reviewed to some extent. It's not legal advice, but it's just making sure that they have certain things in place. For example, standard operating procedures for how they handle disputes, how they do their vetting, how they choose matches. Because in the material list, one of the things that if I had been the client and I would have asked, hey, how do you vet the matches that you're going to introduce to me? She probably didn't have anything in that movie, because clearly the woman that ended up meeting this guy was, spoiler alert, attacked or something. They don't really go into the details, but there wasn't a proper vetting process. She just basically walked around with a little book, taking notes. That's just not enough, right? And so it's really important for companies to know that they need to have standard operating procedures that are consistent, that if they say they do background checks, that they do those background checks, that, whatever, if they're checking, by the way, they all should be checking identification, but I know not everybody does that because they don't think it's important or necessary. So these are the things that with this accreditation process, they're getting credibility because we're putting them through a rigorous process that shores up their operations so that we're protecting the clients and we're protecting the business. But what are your thoughts on that?
Oof, I haven't seen the movie yet. It literally just came out here, in Spain. Uh, I don't know. What can I say? Um, where to go with this? I mean, there's a couple of things. Just building on a point you had made before. I mean, one thing to keep in mind, it's an interesting thing. Like when we talk about regulation, like this industry is, it's not that it's, yes, there is some kind of like scattering of regulation, most of which is directed at contracts. Um, and again, we're not talking about 50 separate states. We're talking a handful of states that have created contract requirements. In other words, provisions that must exist in your contract. Now, in some of those states, I think maybe in 8 of them, the absence of one of these obligatory clauses may render the entire contract unenforceable. Like, wow. And then you go, well, what does that mean? Well, it means all the other protections that you have in there, licenses and the confidentiality, everything else, it's as though it just went poof. What are the legal consequences of that? Well, wow, I don't want to imagine, right? So, New Jersey, for example, that is one of the only legislation that actually doesn't. I don't think it actually regulates the contract. And it's the only one that actually. It's totally, very different from New York. In New Jersey, actually, they're the ones that say, well, if you're gonna do vetting, if you're not doing vetting, you have to explicitly say that you're not vetting. You have to actually put that in the contract, or you have to actually, or somehow communicate that to the only one that actually says anything about vetting. So one of the I guess where I'm going at, right, long, long-winded thing of mine is just that the regulation that's out there is so disparate, is so different that you can have a contract that's valid under California law, but just totally invalid under New York law. New York has this obligation for this, client bill of rights. California doesn't. New Jersey doesn't. You know what I'm saying? So, you can have your boilerplate contract your lawyer wrote for you in Delaware, and it works in Delaware, but it may be completely invalid in New York or in Connecticut or in North Carolina because, you didn't comply with mandatory disclosure. Right? And so this is a thing that, say, all right, well, and again, I kind of I don't want to dive into this next point, but it really, I've been counseling businesses for over 30 years, and there are businesses who, particularly startups, who really don't have the time or energy to start digging through every state statute that might apply to their contract. You're moving fast and you're lucky to actually just get a contract. You've got so much other stuff to do with, right? And you kind of go into businesses, there are situations where people go into the business without doing that homework and get caught. Now, some folks are totally okay with that, and others aren't. Some folks can afford that, and others really can't. Uber, that was a different model. Uber, but when they knew that they were going to be violating statutes left and right. They knew they budgeted for litigation. They budgeted for all the fights they were going to have. They spend money lobbying to change a lot. So that was their model. It wasn't any accident. They knew very well that was going to happen. I think we're in a different situation here. I don't think that's really our dynamic here. Right?
No, absolutely. And, this idea of, oh, you started a matchmaking company and you set it and forget it, that's just not the way anything works because rules are constantly changing, regulations are changing. And every time you enter a market, you need to be mindful of what is involved in entering a market. And I think often that's just something that people do willy-nilly. And regulations about data protection, are getting stronger and stronger. We had the GDPR that launched a few years back in Europe, and that is, now the CCPA in California is spreading through the US. If you're a matchmaker, you're not tracking any of this and you're not going for continuing education about ethics and compliance, which would be the requirement and with IMCB, you're not going to know when it hits your state that you're supposed to be doing something that you're not doing. And so that's the issue here. It's just really providing a service where people are understanding what they're doing, what their regulations are that they need to follow, and just really protecting yourself. I mean, if you look at, there things have become very international, if you will, right? Because people work off of an internet connection, and so they can be anywhere, all the nomads, etc. And if you're a US matchmaker and you take a client in Europe, well, they have a 14-day rescission period. And not only is it a rescission period, you cannot work in that 14-day without explicit permission from that client to begin work because they can back out of that contract. So if you start working and they say, you know what, I'm not going to go forward with this, they get all their money back and you put all that energy and effort in for doing something that if you had known you wouldn't have done it. And this happens a lot. And I mean, not that that happens, but that we have matchmakers in the States working with clients in the UK or, and vice versa. I mean, there's a lot of regulations for companies that are not in the US working
Yeah,
with
love
clients that
that
they don't know.
they raised it. That's such an important point. You and in many instances, I really feel you're a much better lawyer. I want to be as good a lawyer as you. You're much very, you really do raise a lot. So it's such a pleasure working with her. But you, such a good point. I mean, one thing is matchmaker regulation, if we want to call it that. And another thing is all the other regulation of it, like data protection, like, um, I don't know.
Confidentiality.
Well, no, I was thinking, God, you and I remember recently we're talking about money laundering and know your customer requirements. I mean, there's a huge crackdown I was reading about in China, on matchmaking outfits in China. Again, it's not really a model to follow, but I think it's like 1,900 companies got rounded up because it turned out that after investigation, a lot of them were being used as fronts for for moving money illegally, for fraud, basically to get access to people's asset. I mean, so wow. So there's a lot going on. I guess the point is, and I love that you mentioned this. It's like, first we got to kind of get your head around what are the regulations here in the state, which again, there's matchmaking regulation, and then there's others regulation as well. There's consumer fraud regulations. There's intellectual property. There's privacy. And as you said, I mean, privacy regulation, although, initially a European thing, as you said, it's popping up all over the state now. And yeah, we're dealing with make no mistake about it. I mean, as a matchmaker, you are handling sensitive personal information.
Yeah.
Um,
Especially as a matchmaker, because you have these forms and, you have a website. And if you don't have an HTTPS where you have that security, that's a first step. And then you're using a compliant form to capture information. And then if you're not following the regulations to be able to delete the information, or you're sharing contact information and things over unsecured platforms, those are all the things that people need to know and understand. And
or getting hacked, or what are the legal consequences of getting hacked
yeah,
and somebody accessing your all that your client information?
which
What are
is
your legal
thing.
obligations? Wow. Yeah, that's not. I'll tell you. I mean, practicing in you. I mean, I've seen genuine horror stories.
Yeah, it is a lot to deal with. And I think or it might have frozen there. Okay, you're back. Um, so yeah, so the point is that this International Matchmaking Compliance Board is really designed to help both the the customer and the organizations to conduct business in the most ethical and best way for you to stay out of trouble, really. We can't guarantee it, but we're going to do our damnedest to give you all the information that we can to help you be compliant in the business that you do, because there's no, I mean, unless you want to do the research and figure this stuff out on your own, trust me, I've been in this industry for well over a decade, and I'm never heard this anywhere. I mean, it's bonkers. And because the matchmaking industry is more mainstream now, it's becoming more of a thing. People understand the value. I mean, it's like working with a realtor. Yeah, you can go find your own house, or you can work with a realtor. But, you know, you have to pay a fee for that, obviously. And those fees are pretty significant too, which is the other reason why this is so important. On average, you're paying upwards of $10,000. That takes you right out of claims court, small claims court. So now you're operating in a different area. So yeah, you want to be compliant. And also people are making a major investment. They want to know that you are following the regulations and doing the right thing by them. So it's a lot. And
It's a tough one, because a, a a lot of the regulations that exist, you check like the New York law, for example. I mean, it's old. It was drafted before anybody thought there was an internet. It was really written at a time when people were selling these services door to door. It was really a legislation designed to protect people from aggressive door to door sales. And that's basically the background. And here it is today, applying to a completely different industry, a completely different dynamic. And so, it's tricky to navigate, because it's not adapted to, so you've got that level of complication as well here. So yeah, I think I don't want to, just before we went live, it was like, oh, should we do a disclaimer, about are we giving legal advice, and I think it is important to understand that IMCB is not, um, I think I don't want to speak for Arlene, but I mean, I think it's fair to say that IMCB is not it's not legal sign off. It's not a thing that says, okay, according to the IMCB, everything we're doing here is, I mean, that's what we go, that's what we use lawyers for. I think what IMCB accreditation is about, is, well, yeah, your contracts will be audited, your operating procedure will be audited to see, what you're doing. I mean, it can go that far, but what you can't be mistake that for, oh yes, it has the, good housekeeping seal of approval. All the contracts are all legal and everything. That would be providing legal advice, and then I'm
agreed.
not doing.
Yeah. And it's basically a self-regulatory organization that doesn't exist today. There's nobody else out there doing this. And it's not just for all of the reasons that we discussed, but there's also some benefits to becoming accredited, because we're working towards bringing in healthcare. For example, when I became a matchmaker, I left the corporate world. I had my Cobra and I was good for a year. And then I started a business, and a year into it, I was uninsured health insurance, right? So one of the things we want to bring into this IMCB is to offer services for a bigger group as an organization where they can get health insurance, because entrepreneurs, we can buy in bulk and it's a bigger thing. Or for example, a lot of matchmakers get thrown off of platforms the minute that the platform finds out that it's a matchmaker. What I would hope is that we're going to advocate for them, so that these businesses start to look at matchmaking as this is a legitimate business. They are consultants essentially, and they should be entitled to have a bank account with you or have a merchant account with you. I mean, they're as high risk as, a consultant is high risk, right? So, especially if they've gone through this rigorous process and have a genuine intent and desire to really comply with regulations and so forth, and they're really putting the effort in there. So that is the hope, that we're going to advocate for the industry and really bring services that are not typically available to matchmakers so that they can have thriving businesses and more people will meet their significant other through them. I mean, it's a lot.
I mean, I'm a big fan of the advocacy, right? I mean, I think that that's like kind of the destination so
Exactly.
you can actually, as I alluded to before, a lot of the hard to say, a lot of the legislation or regulation that affects matchmaking is outdated, outmoded, not really designed for today's industry, applies indiscriminately between, you know, online dating platforms as well as matchmaking, right? So it's a mess. And so it's time to sit with lawmakers and to help them draft appropriate legislation.
Regulations that make sense. Yeah. Yeah. Especially in New
Um,
York.
I mean, I think that's what you and I knew from pharma and from other regulators, what we learned in regulated industries that, lobbying is not lying, taking people to dinner. Lobbying is literally helping lawmakers um, uh, draft appropriate legislation that actually helps their stakeholders. Right? I mean, that's kind of what I think that's what legal lobbying is about.
And that's what
So
good law is all about.
yeah,
Absolutely.
I mean, hopefully we'll get there. I mean, we got to start here first, But I think that's where I'd love to see us heading there. But we got a lot of work to do now in getting this off the ground and getting to work, right? Uh, so let's do
Yeah.
that. I don't know.
The good news is that right now we're in the process of putting together the advisory committee, and I I put out a request for nominations. So if you're a matchmaker and you're listening, if you didn't get that request, you can DM me on social media at Arlene Washburn. But we have sent it out to anyone who's on our secret matchmaker newsletter. It's a newsletter that only matchmakers are allowed to receive and anyone who's on that list would have gotten this. So if you are a matchmaker who's been in the business 2 to 3 years anywhere in the world, because we do want representation from all over the world, this is a global initiative. You can nominate someone a colleague that you feel is trustworthy and someone that would be great at representing the industry, or you can nominate yourself. So if you didn't get that invitation, please hit me up on social media at Arlene Washburn, and I'm happy to send that to you because we want buy-in from the industry. This is a collaboration of really creating something amazing that is going to support everyone involved, and it's a win-win for the clients, and it's a win for the matchmakers and the lawmakers for that matter. Because people will
Absolutely,
feel aligned.
absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think and I think, God, we may as well just end it there. I mean, because that's really the call to action. And I think, you know, in a nutshell, I mean, where I come, but to really answer your first question, what brought me, what attracted me to this, I really, and it's probably, it feels also to my side as a teacher, I really, I'm very much drawn to this idea that of raising the bar professionally and raising the professional level, right? Professionalizing the industry, raising the bar in terms of ethics and ethical, you know, ethical business behavior, and profession, which to me equates it really as professional business, and that is just wonderful to be involved. That appeal. And I think that's really what drives it. Right? So everything else is great.
Yeah. Absolutely. Peter, I am so grateful to have you be a part of this. You have been amazing, and I'm so glad that you were open to the idea because sometimes when you reach out to professionals and you start talking about matchmaking, they just kind of tune you out. Like it's like, oh, especially if they're married, you and I are
Right.
both married. But like, if you're a single person, maybe you have a little one ear open. But I mean, this is serious business. I can't think of anything more important in life than the partner that you choose. And your first match is your matchmaker and your matchmaking company. And we just want to facilitate this and really professionalize this business in a way where it's going to help everyone involved. So again, Peter, thank you so much. And thank you for everyone tuning in. We've had over 1,000 people tuning in today on the Matchmaker Mentor podcast. And if you're a matchmaker committed to growing an ethical, thriving business, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and visit the imcboard.org. We currently have a waiting list, so you can sign up to learn more about the accreditation process. Believe me, you're going to want this, and all the daters out there, you're going to want to know who's accredited so that you know you're doing good business with the right person. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Matchmaker Mentor podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with fellow matchmakers and friends. For more resources, training, and inspiration, visit lovepromastermind.com and follow us on social media. Remember, matchmaking isn't just a career, it's a calling. Let's keep building connections, changing lives, and growing together. Until next time, stay inspired and keep matching.